Shlomo from Tul Lebanon, Shlomo from Mount Lebanon. Is today's spoken Lebanese originally a Syriac dialect? To analyze this, let us consider the syntax, the word, the syntax, the phrase, but also grammar and vocabulary. First, we will move to the medieval period, northern Lebanon, Le Comté de Tripoli, and let us read Gregory Bar Ebraus. He's a Syriac writer, a Syriac scholar from the school of Tripoli, and he wrote in the 13th century, the Syriacs of Lebanon pronounced the kuf, uf. Nothing has changed. Even today, the Lebanese pronounce the ka, And those of us who had the chance to go to church 40 years ago, they can still remember that the priests used to say Adishat aloho, Adishat hailtono, Adishat lomoyuto, instead of today's Kadishat, because he didn't learn Syriac like today at the seminar, but he used to learn Syriac from his family. So he had the real Maronite Lebanese pronunciation. After the kuf, we also have the interdentals. An interdental is a letter pronounced with the tongue between the teeth. This happens to the Syriac dolat that becomes the after a vowel, the like in English, and the Syriac tau that becomes thi like in English after a vowel. But in Lebanese, the dolat is always d and the tau is always t, whether we are speaking modern Lebanese or even Syriac. Lebanese, like Syriac, contains 5 vowels, a, e, I, o, u. These vowels are typically Syriac and typically Lebanese. Today, the only language or dialect in this region containing these 5 vowels is Lebanese, because Arabic contains only 3 movements called harakat, 3 movements, and cannot differentiate clearly between, for example, o and u, or between I and e. To give an example, we say in Lebanese, they told him is a, lu, lo. We have clearly a, u, and o. And if we say my hand, it's I, de, and we have clearly I and e. And this is very important because we cannot write actually Lebanese with Arabic letters, otherwise it changes completely the meaning of the word, because we lose 2 vowels out of 5. Not only the vowels, but also we have something very particular, is the haraka, the movement of the vowel, that is essential in Arabic on the first letter and doesn't exist in Lebanese. For example, in Lebanese we would say knise instead of kanise. We would say trablos instead of tarablos, and itla and zal instead of itla and inzal, and ktib for book instead of kitab. This is again very particularly Syriac in the syntax. Now about the T that has no vowel, but now we're talking about the end of a word. For example, the first person, singular, we would say inzilit, I went down, whereas in Arabic it will have to be nazaltu and not inzilit. To go up, we would say in Lebanese itla'at, whereas in Arabic it would be sa'adtu. And ja'at, akalet, instead of ja'tu and akaltu, and this is found clearly in Syriac, where we say, especially in one of the prayers, kifnet ulo ikhlet, I starved and I didn't eat. كفنيت إخليت جعت أكلت. Exactly the same pronunciation in Lebanese. We also say بيت لدانيال, his house of Daniel. It sounds very weird in English, also in French and also in Arabic, but this is the syntax in Syriac, بيت لدانيال. This is how it is said in Lebanese and in Syriac. The H is not pronounced very often. For example, we would say بيت Daniel, the house of Daniel. It's written بيته but pronounced بيته. His house is بيته, whereas in Arabic it would be بيته. So again we see that the H is not pronounced. And then we have the plural. The plural is an N in Syriac, whereas in Arabic and also Hebrew it's an M. For example, we would say in Lebanese and Syriac كلكن, all of you. It would be كلكم with an M in Arabic. We would say بيتكن, your house. In Arabic it would be منزلكم with an M. Another plural in Syriac and Lebanese is the plural in E. Let's take a word. In the singular, a tree is called ilono. Plural, it will become ilone. Ilono, ilone. This is how we go to the plural in Syriac. Same thing is used today in Lebanese, where we would say, for example, the Lebanese people in plural, it's Lebnaniye. The French people, plural, it would be le Francawiye, whereas in Arabic it would be Lebnaniyun, Faransiyun. So the plural in A is also Syriac, and it's clearly used in modern Lebanese. Now, how to determine the origin of a Semitic language? There is something very easy. We just take a word and see its variation in every Semitic language. For example, 3 is going to be thalatha in Arabic. The th will correspond to a sh in Hebrew, and it would be shalosh. It would correspond to an S in Gaz, that would be selase. It will correspond to a T in Syriac, that would be tlot. So thalatha, selase, shalosh, and tlot. In Lebanese we say tlete, tlete with a T. So here we know that the origin of Lebanese is Syriac. Let us take another letter, like the D, for example. If we say gold, in Syriac it's a D, dehab, and in Lebanese too, dahbo or dehab. The D becomes Z in Hebrew, zahab, and it becomes a th in Arabic, dhahab. So once again, we have the D that is particularly Syriac. So we have a Syriac origin for the Lebanese pronunciation or language today. There are no interdentals in Lebanese, and interdentals do not exist in the Syriac alphabet, even though other Syriac communities pronounce the interdentals, but these are just variations of letters in the Syriac alphabet. For example, we have a T in Syriac. We don't have the letter Th. It's just the T that is pronounced Th after a vowel. This means that the Syriac alphabet is the Phoenician alphabet with 22 letters. Arabic has 28. That becomes 29 with the Hamza. So the Lebanese actually today is using, while talking, the Phoenician Syriac alphabet of 22 letters. And what happens to the Hamza? For example, in Syriac, we would say for water, mai. In Arabic, it's ma'. So what happens is that the hamza in Arabic corresponds to a yud in Syriac. And the Lebanese today, they will use this for every word, whether the word in Lebanese comes from Syriac or from Arabic. Let us see how. If we say mai instead of ma, we are using a Syriac word. But if we say for a member of parliament, for example, nayib instead of na'ib, then we're taking an Arabic word and we're pronouncing it as if it was a Syriac word. If we say that someone is sleeping, we would say nayim from the Arabic na'im, and again we replace the hamza by a yud of the Syriac alphabet. Now we have many words that we will look at. For example, Syriac words in the Lebanese today, like bir, it's a well, it would be in Arabic bi'r with a hamza. Again, mai, it would be in Arabic ma, water, and riha, the smell, that would be in Arabic ra'iha. Riha is a Syriac word used in Lebanese today. Now let us take Arabic words used as if it was Syriac words, and we will see the word ras, the head, ras, in Arabic ra'as. Ra'is, a chief, for example, a leader, that would be rayis in Lebanese instead of ra'is. Mara, a woman, instead of the Arabic mar'a. And even names, Arabic names, used by Lebanese people, like Hana becomes Hana, and Wafa becomes Wafa, etc., etc. Now, Syriac survives in the Lebanese today mainly in matriarchal vocabulary. For example, the mother always made a clear difference between the outside and the inside. The outside being something that is away from our identity, the inside is the pure identity, and she would call them barra and juwa. Barra from Syriac bar and juwa from Syriac gao. In Arabic it would be kharij and dakhil. So we see that these words are purely Syriac. Then the first word she would use for her child is just to call him a baby, and baby in Syriac is bubu. She would call him bubu and not tufl in Arabic. And the first game she would play with her child is the game called ba'use. Ba'use is a word that is a Syriac verb, ba. Ba or b'i means to make a research. And we know that the mother and her child closes the eyes and searches for the other and then opens the eye to say ba'use. Use is always used in Syriac to show that something is small. So it's like a tiny little research. This is the meaning of ba'use, a pure Syriac game still used today. To differentiate between a dog that can be harmful and a nice little puppy, she would use the word Bobby. Bobby is a name given to puppies today in Lebanese and simply means in Syriac something that is kind. And when a mother is serving her children and putting food on the plate, she would tell him, do you want some more zoom with your meat? Zoom in Arabic would be the word asir, and in English, juice, the juice of the meat. So it's another word that is always used today in Syriac. And when she prepares food for her children before they go the school, she would give them the zuwede, from Syriac zwode, meaning the provisions, al-zad in Arabic. And when she asks her children to undress, she would say shlah. Shlah in Arabic would be inza or ikhla, and shlah is another Syriac word. And when she wants to define the house, the home more exactly, she would use the word beit. In Arabic, we use al-dar or al-manzil, but she would insist on beit. And beit would be also used for the family. For example, if we say beit khuri, meaning the family khuri, in Arabic it would be al-khuri. So once again, beit is for home, house, and family. It's also for village, like Beit Shbeib, Beit Miri, it's a village. And finally, it can be also a publication house, maison d'édition, like in French, whereas in Arabic we would use the word dar, like dar nashr. So once again, this is purely Syriac. Syriac survived mainly in our matriarchal vocabulary, but we will see next time how much Syriac is present in our vocabulary every day and everywhere in our modern Lebanese tongue. Shlomo from Tur, Lebanon. Shlomo from Mount Lebanon.